All righty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Roundabout Sports, presented by Interstate 70 Sports Media, where our passion is our profession. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's kind of a gloomy Wednesday, August 2nd, outside here in Missouri, but I am my show, Jeremy Karp. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a lot to talk about on this trade deadline special episode of Roundabout Sports. Be sure to find us on Facebook, Twitter. You can find us at Interstate 70 Sports Media on YouTube as well. And of course, on interstate70sports.media. You can also find us on Spotify, Breaker, and Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Heck, anywhere you can find a podcast, we're there. With all that said, the biggest thing we got to talk about is the trade deadline. Now, yesterday, I must say, it was a wild day for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, in the hours leading up to their first in a 3-game series against the Minnesota Twins, the Cardinals were, as expected, especially entering at 47-60 at the time, high sellers at the trade deadline. It was something that was actually unusual of the organization, as normally in years past they're pretty dormant when it comes to doing anything at the trade deadline. But over the past few days, the Cardinals had already traded away reliever Jordan Hicks to the Blue Jays. Jordan Montgomery, along with Chris Stratton, both went to the Texas Rangers. But on Tuesday, the sale continued. With that, we had Paul DeJong was the first to go. Now, Paul DeJong, along with cash considerations from the Cardinals, went to the Toronto Blue Jays for minor league righty Matt Swanson. And Swanson, he's 24 years old. He right now in the minor leagues is 4-1 with a 1.11 ERA. In 26 games, 32 innings pitched, 39 strikeouts, and a whip of 0.93. He was drafted in the 13th round by the Toronto Blue Jays in 2021. As for DeJong burst on the scene in the majors with St. Louis with a 123 WRC plus for the Cardinals in his rookie year in 2017. He hit 25 home runs and garnered a second-place Rookie of the Year finish. I mean, it was enough to satisfy management, to say the least, as in March of the following year, the Cardinals signed him already to a 6-year, $26 million extension. That included a $12.5 million club option with a $2 million buyout for 2024, plus a $15 million option with a $1 million buyout for 2025. So for the remainder of this season, DeJong is owed about $3 million. Now, according to Derek Gould of the Post-Dispatch, the Cardinals are going to be covering the buyouts and half of DeJong's remaining salary in the trade to Toronto. Now, like I said, it was a great rookie year for DeJong, but unfortunately, it had only gone downhill from there. And it's unfortunate, but the money did not equate to the success that they expected. And it got to the point where DeJong last year was demoted to AAA Memphis for 3 total months out of the season. This year, he's done better offensively, but has still become extremely expendable for the Cardinals, and they proved that with dealing him yesterday. So for the next few hours, over the course of that trade deadline, the phones were still ringing, and the rumors were swirling. Now, the biggest name that was coming up was outfielder Dylan Carlson. He was reported by SME Sports Media, among other places, to be heavily tied to the New York Yankees in regards to a potential deal. But at the end of the day, when the deadline struck, Dylan Carlson is still a St. Louis Cardinal. Can't say the same for Jack Flaherty, though. 10 minutes before the deadline, it was announced that the Baltimore Orioles, who are currently in first place in the American League East, acquired Flaherty from the Cardinals in exchange for infielder Cesar Perito and left-hander Drew Rom, as well as right-hander Zach Showalter. Now, once again, stop me if you heard this before. It wasn't long ago where Zach Flaherty seemed to be the burgeoning ace in St. Louis. He looked to be the guy. He tossed 151 innings over 28 starts in 2018, allowing just 3.34 earned runs per 9 innings. He followed that up with even better job in 2019. His ERA dropped to 2.75 in 196 and a third innings. He struck out almost 30% of the batters he faced, and he finished fourth in the voting for the National League Cy Young. But as same with the Young, injuries and inconsistency took its toll on the now 27-year-old. Flaherty has stayed healthy this year, starting 20 games and throwing 109 2/3 innings. But he entered this year, or when trading to the Orioles, he finished his Cardinals tenure with a 4.43 ERA in 2023. And now, as for the Cardinals, look, they now have a slew of prospects and players that they hope they can build the future around. And, I look at it, their goals, John Mozeliak made it perfectly clear. He deemed it best to sell players and bring in reinforcements to build up the roster for next year and beyond. And let's also not forget Genesis Cabrera was also among those that were traded away to the Toronto Blue Jays in general. And the thing of it is, despite trading Cabrera, Montgomery, Stratton, Hicks, DeYoung, and Flaherty, the Cardinals ended up getting 2 infielders, 7 pitchers, and a catcher, all of whom are prospects. So it is their way of building up for the future. 4 of them already have found themselves in the organization's top 10 prospects, and an additional 2 of them are in the top 30. John King, who is not ranked, will join the major league roster immediately. He will wear number 47, while the remaining 9 players are going to work their way, whether it be in Palm Beach, Springfield, or Memphis, and work their way up to the major leagues. Look, the big thing here, like I said, was pitching. Pitching, it was priority number 1. And heading into 2024 offseason, and yeah, dudes got it perfectly. They were blowing it all up. This is not something we have seen out of the Cardinals that often. We are not used to seeing the Cardinals really sell the way they had over the course of the past few days. Meanwhile, like I said, pitching was the biggest thing. He was honestly, his hand was dealt here. All the guys he traded away had expiring deals upcoming. And so for rental players, you got what you got. You take a look at, right now, the Cardinals only have one true consistent starter. I mean, heading into next year, and that's Miles Mikolas. Wainwright's going to retire. We don't know about Liberatore and Hudson. We've already gone far in depth on past episodes about how, inconsistent they are. Montgomery's gone. Flaherty's gone. They are building for next year and trying to find out who's that rotation and who is going to be in it. The way I see it, the front office did a great job acquiring plenty of arms. But the thing of it is, they didn't get that high upside. They didn't get anybody for the now. They got players for the then. And that is an issue I have. You never want to give up on a season, but it's almost to the point where it looks like that's exactly what the Cardinals are doing. Yeah, they're in last place, although they've been starting to bounce in and out of last and fourth and even third. But the thing of it is, you still don't want to give up on a season. Now, I will say Tommy Edman, Alec Burleson, and Dylan Carlson all remain with the team. But if they didn't remain with the team, it's very likely that a bigger name pitcher, albeit not an elite one, would be traded to the Cardinals. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people did call it at the beginning of the season that the Cardinals. Nobody expected the Cardinals really to be this bad. And players like Contreras have had such a stroke of bad luck. Him and O'Neill, especially. O'Neill did hit a solo home run yesterday, but it just wasn't enough. Once again, the Cardinals lost. But nevertheless, the biggest goal the Cardinals did accomplish, though, was improving the farm system depth. And what's crazy is the Memphis Redbirds haven't posted an above 500 year since 2018. Springfield hasn't had a winning record since 2017, and Peoria hasn't seen a season better than 500 since 2016. So while you've got good players in these minor league systems, look, these teams need help. And there are guys in the organization now that give this minor league system a boost when needed. So the main thing is looking at the rest of the season, how these players turn out, and especially given how the pitching bullpen and the rotation is going to look for the future. So that's where we got with that goal for the St. Louis Cardinals. Lastly, honestly, they got another catcher. He's a prospect, but the thing of it is, you look at the situation where we don't know what's going on with Contreras and Kisner, and Herrera. Right now, the catcher situation is just a mess. When they traded away a catcher, Sammy Hernandez, a lot of people thought it was a pretty good deal. We don't know. We hope that Contreras bounces back. I think he's personally capable. But the biggest problem with Contreras is it's not even his fault. It's the fact that literally he's following in the footsteps of a future Hall of Famer. So the expectations of him and what he needs to do are way too high. He's a really good hitter, but an average to below average defender. Meanwhile, Yachty was arguably one of the greatest catchers of all time fielding and, a pretty decent hitter. So it's not really fair to Contreras. Kisner has improved. Herrera just doesn't see the at-bats enough to do anything. So Sammy Hernandez really was likened by management in the Blue Jays organization prior to the trade. So we will have to see what happens in the future in regards to the catcher situation in St. Louis in the years to come. With all that said, as we reach the 15-minute mark on the show, thank you so much for tuning in to Roundabout Sports, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp. We've talked about how the Cardinals performed at the trade deadline, and now it's time we go west in Missouri and look at the lovable last place American League Central Kansas City Royals. So while not as active as the Cardinals, the now 33-75 Kansas City Royals made some deals of their own. And believe it or not, the Royals traded 5 major league players and acquired 9 minor leaguers, some of whom will be in the majors this year helping out the team. Shortly before the deadline yesterday, the Kansas City Royals traded lefty Ryan Yarbrough to the Dodgers for minor league infielder Devin Mann and 19-year-old shortstop Derlin Figueroa. Meanwhile, in a big move, a lot of people weren't sure about. Scott Barlow, the closer of the Royals, is going to the Padres, and in return, the Royals acquired right-handers Henry Williams, top 10 prospect for the Royals or for the Padres, and Jesus Rios. Earlier in the day, the Royals had also acquired Tucker Davidson, a reliever, who was DFA'd by the Angels in return for cash. I had put it on the YouTube channel that Nicky Lopez was traded to the Braves, and the Royals traded reliever Jose Cuas to the Cubs in return for Nelson Velasquez from AAA. So, I hate beating the dead horse. I hate saying, we're back down the road they've always been. It's, not the first time the Royals have been in this situation where they got a slew of minor leaguers and they're ready to go to work. Thing of it is, right now, the American League Central is not a strong division. It is very weak. And the fact that the Royals are as bad as they are, once again, we were at the start of August, and thankfully the Royals are not at 80 losses yet, but they're 33-75. So they are, unless, heaven forbid, divine intervention, it does its fine work, and the Royals don't lose 7 more games this season, they're going to once again finish with the losing record. And you look at some of the pieces the team has that are solid, but other pieces, there's just so much room to be improved on. It's a whole new management structure on the team and in the organization, and that's another reason that the team just isn't exactly functioning properly. And like I said last week, and we had friends like the Night Owl Renee on the show who had mentioned the Royals are really focusing as well on just everything going on with Kauffman Stadium and moving downtown. But that's neither here nor there. Those were the notable things in regards to the Cardinals and the Royals. Meanwhile, players such as Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander get traded from the Mets. In the case of Justin Verlander, the 40-year-old gets traded back to the Houston Astros. I mentioned about the trade between Scott Barlow and Henry Williams. The Boston Red Sox acquired Luis Urias from the Brewers in return for reliever Bradley Blalock. Garrett Cooper and Sean Reynolds went from Miami to the Padres in return for left-handed pitcher Ryan Weathers. Josh Bell went from Cleveland to Miami in return from Gene Segura and Khalil Watson. Surprising move. Meanwhile, Dominic Leone, former Cardinal, went from the Mets to the Angels in return for infielder Jeremiah Jackson. And another notable one, Tommy Pham, another former Cardinal, goes to the Arizona Diamondbacks, once again from the Mets, in return for shortstop Jeremy Rodriguez. And once again, I mentioned about Justin Verlander, traded from the Mets to Houston for Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford. We also mentioned how reliever Brad Hand went to the Braves in return for Alex Barger from the Colorado Rockies. And one of the last notable ones is Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi going from the Pittsburgh Pirates to the San Diego Padres in return for Jackson Wolf, Estuar Solero, and Alfonso Rivias. So a lot of moves made as the trade deadline drew to a close on Tuesday evening, if you will. We're at a point right now where we're in August. Teams are really set with their rosters. We look at the divisions right now. I mean, the strongest one by far is the American League East because the Yankees are in last, and yet they're 55-52. Then you got divisions like the American League Central, like I said, um, there's only one team in that division with a winning record, and it's the Twins, and they're 55 and 53. Everybody else is below 500, and three of the teams have more than 60 losses. You go to the National League and you take a look. I mean, we've talked about it thousands of times about how bad the Cardinals have been lately. But you look at how good the National League West is, and how good the National League East is. I mean, all three teams are still. I will say it's a lot closer in the National League West, though, because you look at the Braves and they're 69 and 37, and they're 11 and a half games up on the Phillies. So, and Eddie, thank you so much for tuning in. We've recapped the trading deadline so much. And meanwhile, we do have breaking news that Lars Nootbaar just hit a 2-run home run. And right now in the second inning, it is 4-0 St. Louis Cardinals. So it's always interesting getting some good news during Cardinal news during the middle of a show. Lord knows we need more of that. Because as of now, as it stands, the Cardinals are 11 and a half games out of first place at 47 and 61. They are 23 and 30 at home, 24 and 31 on the road, and they're 3 and 7 in the last 10. So hopefully they get a good win tonight and look to build off that in the first game post-trade deadline. Before we close it up for this evening, I do have a couple of other pieces of news to bring up in the world of sports. So, in the world of college football, I need to bring up the fact that there's a lot of controversy regarding the Pac-12 conference in college football, because the Big Ten right now has begun exploratory discussions about potential additions, because last week, the Pac-12 lost Colorado to the Big 12 conference. There's only 9 schools left in the Pac-12 conference, and the future of the conference is very uncertain at this point, for multiple reasons. Right now, the Big Ten is really working on trying to get Washington and Oregon to join their conference. And, the thing of it is, Big Ten schools project an average value of $60 million per year in just TV money alone. Whereas in the Pac-12, the problem is games that are usually broadcasted from the Pac-12 conference are on so late at night. I mean, it has its own block called Pac-12 After Dark, but nevertheless, it's on at 11 to 1 in the morning, and not a lot of people are going to see it on a Saturday night. And so if the Pac-12 loses Washington and Oregon, and even just Oregon for that matter, it's just it would be a big blow. Meanwhile, in the world of professional wrestling, WWE's executive chairman Vince McMahon has been served with a subpoena by federal agents. McMahon is also taking a federal leave from the company following major spinal surgery nearly 2 weeks ago, according to CEO Nick Khan. And they said that the federal law enforcement agents executed a search warrant and served a federal grand jury subpoena to the executive chairman. The company said it's received voluntary and compulsory legal demands for documents, including from federal law enforcement and regulatory agencies. And, last year, the Wall Street Journal reported the WWE was investigating an alleged $3 million payment McMahon served to a departing female employer during an alleged affair. Things from that scandal are still ringing forward in 2023 and probably will beyond. So we'll have to just see how all that keeps going. Also, lastly, or one of the big other quick hitters from WWE is the fact that SummerSlam, the biggest party of the summer, arguably, will be taking place on Saturday, August 5th at Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan. A lot of great matches are scheduled to take place, including Cody Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor, Ronda Rousey taking on Shayna Baszler in an MMA rules match. Very, very curious at how they're going to play that one off. And we're also going to have Asuka versus Charlotte Flair and Bianca Belair. And lastly, a undisputed WWE Universal Championship match and Tribal Combat match between Roman Reigns and Jey Uso, among other matches that we have scheduled. So be sure to stay tuned, as we definitely, especially Christopher Miles, who keeps you covered every Sunday with Issues with Wrestling with Christopher Miles, as he takes you covered on all of that, on everything sports related in the world of professional wrestling. With that, folks, I do have a couple quick hitters to go from the NFL this evening. So, excuse me, tomorrow, Thursday, August 3rd, the first official football game of the NFL season is on. That's right, it's the Hall of Fame game between the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. It's highlighted by the fact that legends such as Jets corner Darrelle Revis and headliner former Browns offensive lineman Joe Thomas will be taking center stage over the weekend as they become two of the newest members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And right now, since it's preseason, a lot of starters are going to be out. Nevertheless, I do know that Kellen Mond, former third-round pick and current quarterback for the Browns, will be the starting quarterback, as will former first-round pick Zach Wilson for the New York Jets. Also, the latest roundups are that from Kansas City Chiefs camp is that Isaiah Pacheco says he is very close to fully returning to practice. The second-year running back underwent off-season hand and labrum surgeries, and he should be cleared for contact by August 20th. And the reason for the delay was just because of Pacheco's shoulder situations. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp suffered a hamstring injury in training camp practice yesterday. Although it's not expected to keep him out long term, he should be good to go week 1, but they're going to hold Cooper Kupp back in camp to just make sure he doesn't aggravate the injury. We also have a slew of roster cuts all across the league, including rookie corner Corey Trice Jr., who was actually placed on injured reserve on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Las Vegas Raiders releasing former first-round tight end O.J. Howard, and piece of injury news: Calvin Ridley, wide receiver on the Jaguars, has a toe injury that will limit him in practice for the foreseeable future. With all that, folks, I want to thank you all so much. Be sure, if you are in the St. Louis metro area, to stay safe from the storms that are going to be happening overnight into Thursday. It might be rough. Weather's been hot lately, humid and stormy. So be sure to be safe out there. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. Once again, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Breaker, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Anywhere else you can listen to a podcast, we're there. And of course, I want to send my best well wishes out to our dear friend Hollywood James Knox. We always got nothing but the love for our dear friend Hollywood. And once again, folks, thank you so much. As always, we close the show by putting up the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI. That is 1-800-950-NAMI. That is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's a U.S.-based nonprofit organization founded as a grassroots group by family members of people diagnosed with mental illness. And of course, we always put up the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. For that, you can dial 988. The line is open 24/7, 365, 366 on leap years. Understand that you're never alone in this world. There's always somebody out there that is just a phone call or a text message away. And you are so loved out there. You are truly never alone. And you could also be a person that could reach out or listen to somebody else and help them through tough times. I can't wait to see you all next week for an episode of Roundabout Sports. But until then, on this August 2nd, 2023, I'm the maestro, Jeremy Karp. And remember, life is a book full of empty pages just waiting to be written in. Make your